Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mark's Backyard Birds. Hope everybody's having a good Thursday. Thursday is, the night where we do try to go live every other week or so. And this week, I promised a program about nests or nesting. And what I want to cover tonight is, basically the theories of nesting as far as why birds nest when they do, some of the different kinds of nests they build and who builds what kind of an idea, but mainly the two prominent theories of nesting in the bird world. Whether you are a ground nesting bird or a tree nesting bird. Hi, Steve. Welcome in. I'm flying solo tonight, Steve. The wife is in North Carolina with my daughter, and I'm going to be out there here by the end of the week. But yeah, it's just me tonight, unfortunately. So if I stumble, I don't have the wife to remind me. So be patient with me tonight. Kara Ludwig from Houston, welcome in. Yeah, and as we always remind everybody when we do these lives that I am Mark McKellar here, owner of the Backyard Bird Center in Kansas City, Missouri. So I do these programs from here in the heart of the country, right here in the Kansas City area. And so when we're talking about dates and times, we want to make sure you remember that if you're north of me, you may be a little behind what I'm talking about. And to the south, you may have already happened a little bit. But we try to adjust that because that's why I like to know where you're checking in from. Hi, David from Rhode Island. Welcome in. You guys are great at checking in and letting me know where you are so I can answer questions a little more accurately, if I can, if you will. Nesting is going to be the topic, and a lot of these nests apply to everybody that's joining. And I know we have some Western folks come in from Colorado and California and Washington State, maybe the species of chickadees that I talk might be different out where you're at. And just like Steve checked in with his brown-headed nuthatches down in South Alabama. I love those little birds. I'm going to be hearing those this weekend in North Carolina, Steve. I look forward to hearing the little squeaky toys. They're some of my favorite birds, little nuthatches. TJ is checking in from Georgia. All right, excellent. Jen from Maine. All right. And Bobby, from Colorado Springs. He's been we've been communicating this week. He's a great photographer, Bobby, and you've been sending me some dynamic pictures from out there. Guys, I get so jealous of those Western tanagers and the Bullock's Orioles. I just think are stunning. And the broadtail hummingbirds, those guys, it's a different world once we get out past 2/3 of Kansas over into Colorado. The birds change a lot. So Mary Ruth Nelson is checking in from Minnesota. All right. So we got people from the north and the south and the west and the east. So yeah, this is good. I love having a good crowd from all over, and that usually equals good questions. That's for sure, because a lot of times the conditions are different where you're at, and so the different questions arise from those parts of the world. And so what we typically do, I do a little bit of the main topic I'm going to talk about tonight. And I'm always open for questions. We'll especially at the end, if you've been saving up any bluebird, hummingbird, whatever questions you have, we'll address those as best as I can. I really appreciate your support, and you guys. I know so many of you. I recognize your names from. Here's Denise from Washington State. So yeah, we got again. That's almost four corners. Got anybody from San Diego? That would probably cover just about the four corners right now. All right. Kara Ludwig says her mom lives in New Mexico and saw Western tanager yesterday, and me too. I love those birds. I've seen them on my trips out west and Colorado, New Mexico, California, Arizona. I've seen Western tanagers a lot in my life, but here in the Midwest, we just don't see them. They're very, very rare to turn up here in Missouri. Central Alabama, Jan, welcome in. I have two bluebird nests. Excellent. One in the backyard and one in the front yard. That's great. Then they get those sight lines between those males. That front yard, backyard situation can work. They really can. Those males don't see each other, and they'll both pull off nests. With those wide open areas, it's tough. So So you guys are joining in. I love it. We see people clicking on. So we're going to get started here pretty quick. Let's see. TJ said he has a sinister house wren trying to take over my bluebird nest box. Yep, the bluebirds have built a beautiful nest, and the house wren is going in and removing the pastoral. That they'll do. Those little house wrens are. I know you got house wren fans out there, but when it comes to house wrens and bluebird boxes, they are not good mixed together. Like I said, the North American Bluebird Society even has a statement out against house wren boxes. If you don't place them anywhere close to your bluebird boxes, because they will do just that. And we've talked about them puncturing the eggs, and they can be, sometimes you're lucky because the house wrens do prefer the more wooded areas, and the bluebirds like the more open area. And so sometimes habitat can help you separate them like that, but you just don't want a house wren nest box too close to a bluebird box. And you're TJ, you're seeing, exactly why. I do have a picture. I don't have it with me tonight, but there was a house wren box at my old employment as the Martha Lafitte Thompson Nature Sanctuary I was director of. Well, there was a little house wren box that the Martha Lafitte had put on the side of her house many years ago, and it was there for years and years and years. Well, this eastern phoebe came back one year ahead of the house wrens, and so the phoebe started building a nest on top of the house wren box. Well, you can imagine how well that went over whenever the house wrens came back from migration, and it was quite a battle. The house wren kept trying to tear the phoebe nest apart, and the phoebe kept trying to bring in materials to build on it, and they went back and forth, and it was quite a contest. The wrens always win because they're just little energizer bunnies, and it's hard to keep them from what they want, and so they were fiercely after it. Oh, yeah. So TJ, then if you don't have any other boxes around, they probably have a natural cavity somewhere. Then there's a knot hole in the tree that the wrens probably have. And that's a tough nature battle there, whenever they're like that. So, all right, nesting. Let's get started. Nesting is a huge subject, and of course, nests are hugely varied, and but mainly in the bird world, there are two main theories of nesting. How am I going to succeed, in my nest? First off, for all of them, is they have to time their nesting for when the food that they depend on to feed their young is the most abundant. Now, obviously, for a bird let's go ahead and get him up here. And obviously, everybody loves the bald eagles. Whenever you're a bird like a bald eagle, really what you count on, the limiting factor is you want open water to be able to catch the fish that you're going to mainly feed your babies. Now, they also feed them snakes, and there's lots of things, small mammals, things like that. And we know that bald eagles are scavengers, but this is an example of how when they nest, they want to time it whenever the fish are the most abundant for them to be able to catch. I got asked a question the other night, or the other day, about why do Baltimore Orioles and ruby-throated hummingbirds and black-throated green warblers and all these birds that winter in the rainforests of South America and Central America, why did they even bother or risk the danger of migration all the way back up here to our area to nest? Why don't they just stay and nest in that what we know is a biologically diverse and rich world of the rainforest and Central and South America? Well, as simple as this answer may seem, it is the truth. As rich as the rainforest is, it could not sustain the pressure of all the birds that live there year round and nest there, plus all our birds that winter there. If they were and the insects that they're eating and fruit that they're eating, well, if they were to nest there too, it would, had to feed 5 hungry babies each. It would be too much pressure. They couldn't sustain all of that pressure on that environment. So those birds, like blackpoll warblers and black-throated green warblers and a lot of these birds that come back up here to nest, they time their migration and their nest building with the bloom or the proliferation of the insects that they prefer to feed on. And there's whole programs on how warblers share. Birds that nest in the boreal forest of Canada and North America, where there are warblers that just feed on the outer tips of the fir trees, and there's some that feed only along the trunks of trees. They partition the resources, it's called, but their timing is such that whenever they have their babies, you can bet that those bud worms on that certain fir tree are attacking. So there's lots of those bugs to be able to feed their babies, and that is the key to a successful nesting season. Sometimes things go wrong. You got drought seasons, you've got drought conditions, you've got wildfires, you've got prolific rains, things like that can mess up nesting for a lot of birds. So they time it to what Daylink tells them is when it's going to happen, and hopefully they can pull off a successful nest before they have to leave and go back. So a bald eagle, it migrates. Not all of them, but most of them, nest further north than us. The famous story of DDT and the eagles' eggshells becoming thin and too thin for the mothers to sit on, and they would break and things like that. And so their numbers especially the lower 48 states of the United States became really, really low and endangered, or declared endangered species. But many people don't know that bald eagles were never endangered in Alaska. Well, because one thing is that DDT wasn't used up there. There's not a big farm area, and they weren't getting the residual pesticides through the insects, passed through the fish onto them like they were in this part of the country. But there are huge nesting populations of eagles up in Alaska and across the north. But a lot of our birds in our area, have really come back successfully, and they depend on the open water that's here most of the year round. So some of the bald eagles in Florida nest much, much earlier than they do in Canada. So it's the timing of whenever their food's available. And this huge nest, these bald eagles nest are so massive. This picture was taken at Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge, just northwest of Kansas City. This bald eagle is tiny. That nest is tiny compared to the first one I ever saw in Florida. The one on Cape Canaveral that had been there for many, many years. I was told by the guide that the inside dimensions on that bald eagle's nest was so large that you could set a Chevy Vega old car inside of it, and you couldn't see the car. That's how big the inside dimensions of that nest were. And they add them, they keep them from year to year, and they keep adding to them, and they become massive. And sometimes, the tree gets weak or the wind blows too hard, and they didn't build it in a really good place, and the tree breaks, and they have to go build another nest. And we've seen that happen as well. But, this is an example of how huge a nest can be. And then in contrast to a little tiny ruby-throated hummingbird nest, which is not much bigger than your thumb around, and their eggs are about the size of a jelly belly. And they're amazing little structures. They made are spider webs and lichens to make them, versus that bald eagle's nest, which uses some huge sticks. And they pick those up, and sometimes they'll fly and land on a limb and break it and bring the nest over. Sometimes I've heard stories of bald eagles trying to break a nest on a limb on a big tree, and the limb bouncing back and forth with him. He didn't have enough momentum and weight to break it, and things like that. So this kind of just illustrates the size difference, and of course the material difference that they use. I better take a look over here real quick. Let's see. I was talking about the Western tanagers are beautiful. I only realized this week there's a logo for the Merlin app for Cornell, by Cornell. Absolutely. Absolutely stunning birds. So when we talk about the two different theories of raising young or having young in the bird world, there are precocial young and there are altricial young. Precocial, and that is two different nesting styles. Now, most of the songbirds that we know and you're familiar with in our yards, like the northern cardinal and the ruby-throated hummingbirds, these are all altricial young, and that means that their babies are born helpless. They're bald and they're blind. They cannot take care of themselves. They are highly vulnerable to temperature and to moisture, and they're very they can die very easily if not protected. So they require a huge degree of parental care. And of course, this is a male cardinal feeding the young as well. And a lot of birds. I don't know if you saw my Mother's Day program, the video I did this on Saturday and posted it Monday. It's that yes, and the females do a ton of work in the bird world, but in many songbirds, especially, and even birds of prey, that both adults share the duty and they share the feeding, and even some share the incubation, and some do the brooding. So if a thunderstorm were to come up and rain on this nest, if one of those adults did not brood the young, meaning get on top of them, spread their wings out, and keep the rain off of them, they could very easily succumb to temperature. So they need to have a large degree of parental care is needed. Now, the one benefit of this kind of nesting is that the babies are in the eggs very a short period of time. So with the bald eagle that we showed before, they stay there. She has to sit on those eggs for weeks, where this mother and cardinal probably only has to sit on those eggs for about 2 weeks. And it depends on the temperature and things outside as to how often she can leave them for a while and then come back. But the male, of course, will bring her food as well. It just depends on conditions. And again, remember, when we're talking about here, I had somebody questioning me about the length of time it takes for bluebird eggs to hatch. And in my area, it's 12 to 14 days. The person was questioning me, saying that it's at least 17 to 19 days. And I in North Carolina and here in Missouri, monitor bluebird boxes, and I don't know that I've ever had a bluebird nest that take 17 to 19 days. It could if it were a very cold, wet spring, and there weren't a lot of insects for the babies to be fed, and maybe the parents were behind. But in normal conditions, that's what but you guys up to the north, that the spring comes later, and if the bluebirds were to lay their eggs earlier, and like I said, if it was cool and wet and they were having a hard time finding enough insects, I could see them taking longer. But on average, songbirds, most of the songbirds, we can say 12 to 14 to 15 days, 16 days, just depends in there. But they require a great deal of care. And of course, they'll get their down feathers first, and then they'll get their you can see this nice house finch picture. A young one looks like he's got a mohawk there. For the first feathers that come in on a bird are going to be the down feathers. So because the first thing that is warmth, and so the down feathers come in and they cover the body, and they'll look that fuzzy white all over. Those are not flight feathers. Those are down feathers for keeping warm. And then the pin feathers start to come through and cover it, and the flight feathers grow into and it'll look more like a bird. And instead of a little dinosaur here, they look like. So the gradual process of another 12 to 14 days from the time they hatch, and if they're being fed a good steady diet, those birds are going to be ready to leave in about 12 to 14 days out of the nest, which is pretty incredible. You think about, from the time they hatch to the time they leave the nest. Remember, from the time a human is born to the time they take their first steps, what, a year? And these birds are flying in about 2 weeks. But to move real quickly to the other theory of nesting for a bird, is called precocial nesting. And that is, you spend longer, the young spend longer in the eggs. It takes longer for the eggs to hatch. But when they do hatch, they're already feathered. They're not ready to fly just yet, but they are able to run along on the ground. These are killdeer. The two little young ones running behind mom, and they look just like miniature versions of her, and they can pick up food right away. But they are also obviously, it's very vulnerable for them. They're very dangerous life for them on the ground because they can't fly and escape into bushes, but they count on their camouflage and they count on their ability to run and stop and stay still. And the mother has an elaborate broken wing routine she does, and she'll lure a would-be predator. Like if a fox or something were to she'd spot them, then she would start running away from the babies and dragging her wing and making herself look like she was hurt, so the fox would go after her and leave the babies alone. Now, obviously, again, this is very dangerous because you have nested on the ground. And this is true of wild turkeys, bobwhite quail, ducks. The killdeer, I don't know how well you can see it. Hopefully you can. But down here in this corner, where my picture, just where you can see her eggs if you look really hard. But the eggs are, she counts on that camouflage that they blend in with the rocks and the gravel, and they look so much like that. She really does count on that camouflage to protect those eggs from would-be predators. And this is this is telltale of a precocial nester. The ones that they nest on the ground, they leave their eggs exposed like that to go feed and then come back, and she incubates them. But there is no nest. There's no huge stick nest. There's no moss nest. Sometimes ground nesters will place some soft nesting material for the eggs to lay on. Killdeer don't bother with that. They just lay them right on the ground. And it's the thing that with them is where bluebirds will maybe have 5 young or 4 young. The killdeer, because it is a dangerous lifestyle, they have to count on these birds to be able to survive. Turkeys have lots more eggs. Ducks have a lot more eggs. They have 10, 12 eggs sometimes. And that is because some of those babies are going to die. It's just a dangerous life for them. And there's a lot of would-be predators down there. And so the chances of any one or two of your babies to survive, you need to have more babies. So that's the theory of precocial nesters, is they lay more eggs. They have to sit on them longer. But they're counting on a few to be able to survive, from that dangerous world that is on the ground. So, let me check real quick. I'm going on. I want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions here. So, the Altricial, Precocial, really, it's fascinating, and the number of birds and examples of this all throughout the bird world are amazing, and it's fascinating. I mean, and to really, I couldn't sit here and name, all the incubation periods and how many eggs each of these birds lay. That is just a ton of information out there. And I love, one of my favorite sites in the world is all about birds from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So if you ever have a question like, well, how many babies does a, indigo bunting have, or how long do they sit on that site is amazing at being able to search by bird and to bring up all their nesting information. And so if you have more detailed questions on that, then it's a great resource, allaboutbirds.org, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So, well, some of the nests that get a lot of attention and going to get a lot of questions about, and here's a misunderstanding and that is, I think people think that identifying nest is easy. And boy, it is not. Identifying a bird's nest that you find in the winter or out of the nesting season, and people will send me pictures, and there are some nests that are very distinctive, and then there are many, many, many who are not. So being able to identify a nest is it's a science into itself. Now, the Baltimore Oriole nest is actually one of the ones that is really identifiable, because it is the famous sock. It looked like this, hanging from usually from the end of a limb. They're amazing, and they can be woven out of all kinds of string material. We had one at Martha Lafitte that was in our collection that somebody had given us that was made completely out of horsehair. So the whole nest was woven out of horsehair. It was a pretty beautiful nest, and I don't know that the horse really liked it very much, if they were pulling the hair out of him or if they were just collecting it. But they do hang like this, beautiful socks, and a lot of times you can find these as soon as the leaves fall. You can see this very distinctive nest. Some other nests that are really distinctive is this is a cliff swallow. They nest under bridges and they at overpasses and structures. That the dam structure out at Smithville Lake has several nests under it. And these birds take mud and their saliva, and they build these bottle-shaped nests, really cool. And they're colony nesters, so there'll be a whole cluster of them, several nesting pair occupying this area. They come in and feed the babies a really cool-looking nest. And then another cavity nester that is very popular in people's backyards are the purple martins. This is a brood of young martins that have hatched, only a few days old. They in a box, and you can see they get active pretty quickly, and they like to have sticks and some mud in the bottom of their nest, and they use green cut leaves, and they'll put those in there as well. So this is just an example of just one of many types of nests that are out there. So I think the last one I have is this beautiful little blue-gray gnatcatcher. And I always say on my bird hikes, if you eat gnats for a living, you've got to be small. So this is a tiny bird. They're not a lot bigger than a hummingbird. They are small, and she is building a beautiful little nest here in this cedar. So lots of different kinds of nests, but she is a perfect example of altricial nesting, which her lay her eggs, her babies will be helpless and featherless, and it will need all her attention. So you've got Altricial and Precocial. That's a lot of what I wanted to cover tonight. So, hi, Morgan, is my daughter checking in from North Carolina. Ruth Music signed too. Ruth signing in from Lacine, Kansas. Yes, Ruth, welcome on. Jelly out, and the female Baltimore Oriole left what looked like nesting material laying on the feeder. That's funny. She may have had a mouthful when she got there and couldn't fit that and the jelly in at the same time. So she opted for your the nesting material. All right, let's see. Thank you, David. David, people asking, don't forget to like if you would. That really helps us out. And remember, to keep doing these things, I need your support. And YouTube really appreciates comments, and they appreciate likes and shares and things like that. So thank you, David, for bringing that up. I appreciate it. If you got questions about nesting, if you got questions about any other topic, I'm ready to open up. One thing I didn't say at the beginning, and I was a little bit of a warning. I tested positive for influenza A couple of days ago, so I'm on Tamiflu, and so it's just wonderful. My doctor says I'm the latest case he has ever tested positive for this late in May. So I'm just one of those lucky ones. Bobby, thank you so much. Absolutely. Chiming in with that $5 gift there. Appreciate it. You guys, it is a great topic. And it's one that that a lot of people really don't think as much about, the nesting part of the world. Obviously we all know about birds' nests, and we know about baby birds, but we don't realize how diverse it is and how widespread the different styles are, the nesting materials. And birds fill niches in the environment, and that's so true in their nesting too. Where they choose to nest, how they build their nest, and how often they can nest, so that they can get 2 nests in a season, or like Baltimore Orioles only get 1 nest in a season. The house wrens at least get 2. Bluebirds can get 3 or 4. It's just all of those theories of survival. Mourning doves, which we talk a lot about on here, can have like 6 nests a season, but they're terrible nest builders. They only, they try usually in an evergreen, and they put a few sticks over, and so they lose eggs. And it's there's just different ways to do it. Some are meticulous, really intricate nest builders. While, like I said, mourning doves, maybe 4 sticks laid across a limb is a nest to them. So it is a fascinating subject. All right. Our 8 baby chickadees are 1 week old today. Thank you, David. Yeah, mom is super busy feeding. That's 8 babies. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Oh, waste cleanup. Yep. They, when they poop, most birds grab that fecal sac and fly off with it, and then get it away from the nest. Sometimes the babies just shoot it out. and make a mess. Dad hasn't been seen since the past. Uh-oh. Yeah, well, he may be a deadbeat dad, or yeah, he could have it been a window strike, or even maybe a little sharpshin hawk or something. Hopefully, he's around and helping. He's just been really uh, well hidden. All right, Jen, what kind of environmental or environment do hummingbirds like to nest in? That's good questions. We have hummingbirds showing up at our feeders. Uh, Jen, what we know, and I've said this before, that the Ozark area region of central Missouri, South Missouri, into Arkansas, I consider that the ruby-throated hummingbird capital of the world because the numbers are just staggering nesting down there. Female hummingbirds are the ones who do the nest selecting and nest building and everything, and they tend to prefer water. So let's get back up here. The ruby throats, she'll pick us a lot if there's a stream available or water close by. That tends to be their favorite. Now, obviously, they can't always select those types of area, but that is a very heavy favorite. We were always a prairie region up here in the Kansas City and points north up here, and so we never had a ton of hummingbirds nesting here. But just down in the Ozarks, which is just you go 2 hours south of Kansas City, 3 hours south especially, and the numbers of hummingbirds down there are amazing. There's 100 around one feeder station outside of our Boy Scout camp that my son went to for years. That we would just sit out there on the guys' patio chairs and watch the hummingbirds. I'm serious. It'd be 100 of them. And he said before a thunderstorm, there would be up to 300 out there feeding before the storm, and then they would all disappear, and then they come back in. So yeah, they do like water if they can get it, streams and things. Has anyone had trouble with bees taking over their jelly feeder? Mine is covered with honeybees. Ruth, unfortunately, that is one of the hardest things to deal with when it comes to jelly. We can keeping bees out of hummingbird feeders is manageable. We can do that. The type of feeders, especially the saucer types, are so much better. But there's nothing that's going to keep a bee out that won't keep really an Oriole out out of jelly, because jelly, it's just, I wish there was some other way, but most people don't have problems with bees until later in the summer, unless you have a hive nearby, and it sounds like you do. You can try the bait them away thing. With jelly, I just don't know that it's going to work. So you may want to go ahead and switch from jelly to dried mealworms, and put dried mealworms where your jelly is. The Orioles will take to that. The bluebirds are eating it. The Carolina wrens are eating the dried mealworms. And really, once the Orioles start nesting, they would prefer those mealworms and all to feed their babies over the jelly. So it won't be a great crime to take away the jelly if you've got that kind of bee problem. And then use saucer type hummingbird feeders like the Aspects. That you can only fill about half full, and so the bee can't get its proboscis down there to the jelly. I mean, to the sugar water in there. So that can help you with your hummingbird feeders, but jelly is going to be tough when you got bees. It really is. Yeah, and there must be a bee tree near you, or they've got a hive somewhere close by. And that out of the years, 15 years we lived in this house, I think one summer I had bee issues like that, and there must have been one out in the woods nearby. And I took the jelly in, and like I said, I used a bait hummingbird feeder. I took the bottle type hummingbird feeder where the sugar water is always right there at the flowers, and I made it sweeter and put it out at one end of my deck, and the bees just swarmed it. And then the Aspect hummingbird feeders, saucer type, which are harder for the bees to negotiate, they just left them alone, and that left them for the hummingbirds to feed out of. So that's my suggestion for battling those guys. All right, let's see. Questions? Nope. All right. Well, summer's progressing. I don't know about you, but I still am contending that this is the weirdest spring migration I've ever seen. In the 32 years I've been here in Kansas City, I just can't get over how the timing worked, and really the the small number of a lot of birds that we really look forward to seeing every year, we just didn't have that big push. And unfortunately, we feel like a lot of them passed over us. And I know from talking to you guys and being on with you guys that some of you experienced a very late migration too. And the danger that we run into whenever migration runs really late is once winds do pick up out of the south, they fly over us. They got to get to their nesting grounds. And so I think we've had a big push over. I know there are still migrants passing through, trickling through, but this has not been anything what I would consider close to normal migration here in the Midwest. So you guys, I'm not sure if you're experiencing that where you are. I know that I've heard some of you say the same thing in different parts of the country. All right, Denise, I bought the Aspect window hummingbird feeder from your recommendation. This hummingbird took to it right away. Absolutely, Denise. Hummingbirds are fearless little creatures. And people ask that about window feeders, if they're going to be brave enough. Hummingbirds are just not scared of anything. They know they can outfly just about anything. Bees are one thing they can't, so they have to be cautious of bees. But they're not, to come up to window feeders, and they're so small. Window feeders just make sense. Like I hang mine from under the eave in front of our hearth room window, and there was a female feeding out there this afternoon. She was drinking away. They love that positioning. I've never found that they get scared off by that. Steve, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the program. It's what I live to do. I want to, I love passing along this kind of information and knowledge, and I'm glad you enjoy the topics. And I always invite you, please, if you got ideas for another topic you want me to address, please send it in. I can say I'm going to be out of town for a few days, and I'm going to try to have another video up next Thursday. I won't be live, but I will hopefully have up a new topic, or we may just do something fun like that. The water video I've got that I need to get edited and get posted that we were showing last week. It's an amazing spring fountain with migrants coming by and dropping it off. So we are, we really appreciate the support. We thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully, we will have more information, more programs for you. Obviously, there's countless topics we can talk about, and we will be back with you in a couple of weeks. Let's see. The hummingbirds have been here in Maine, haven't had any luck with Orioles. So you got them that far north. Yeah. And then the Orioles, I don't know. Like I said, it was I honestly, I've yet to see a single Oriole in my backyard this spring, which is highly, highly unusual for us. But it's just been a different year. I've seen Orioles out on our bird hikes. We've seen them around the lakes. We've seen them, down the river bottoms. We've seen them at some of the places we've been, but that not here in the yard. I just think part of it was the product of the black locust trees started blooming about the time they got here, and they loved those and eating those petals and that nectar. And I think that really kept them happy. And they just didn't need to come to the jelly this year, not in our area. David, thank you from Rhode Island and from all points around. I really appreciate you guys joining in. Give us a like, give us a share. Is what I always say on my videos. Until then, come on, let's talk birds. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.